Welcome, Commanders. My name is Servia Pride, and I am still your personal tutor for this particular series of how to enter SubCom and the game in general. This is episode 4. This episode will focus a little bit on the factional differences in a nutshell, and perhaps what you may wish to play. You have covered in episode 1 how the FAF client works, how to start a game, how to get replays, how to get mods. You have covered in episode 2 how the basics of the economy works, how to get resources and how to use them. In episode 3 we have covered opening builds. This is at the point where I feel we should discuss the differences in the faction and which ones you particularly want to use. This is because every faction needs money, every faction uses money, and with regards to a beginner's point of view, every faction's economy is exactly the same. Each of them has the same mechs upgrades, each of them has the same generators. The only difference comes later on for more advanced players with regards to their commander upgrade for economy-wise. But for the novice, that is something that you should not worry about. But now, just simply pick a faction and stick with it until you can play it at a competent level. This is because as soon as you're familiar with your own faction, you can then figure out how other factions work based on how different they are to you, and from there you can branch out and pick other factions. But until you are solid with one faction, it is ill-advised to rotate between them. Now that's out of the way, we should start instead of which faction you should pick to which faction you should not pick. And it is pretty much universally agreed that if you are new to the game, you should not pick Aeon. This is because their units they just play differently from every other faction. For instance, the main battle tank of a UEF is roughly equivalent to the other two of Seraphim and Cybran. These units, if you send them at each other, they will shoot at each other and have vaguely cancelled each other out. Aeon, this is simply not the case because their tanks are made of paper. Their range is higher, and therefore you can see they need more attention. For the novice player who is simply trying to get the grips of the game and has limited attention as it is, trying to get all the basics in order, seems that in order to spend that little extra usage of their attention on units which require attention is ill-advised. So for the purpose of simply understanding the basics of the game, avoid Aeon. Now, with regards to other things, you should therefore contemplate which of the remaining 3 factions you should pick. To be honest, when I started, and a lot of people think, you should probably start with the UEF. This is because all their units do what they do on the tin. They are probably the most mass efficient of the units in that if you had a set amount of resources and you spend them on UEF units, and without any micro you shove them against other units, UEF would win. There are very few, if any, bells and whistles or gimmicks to the UEF. It's simply plan A, attack enemy, go into their base, and win. You don't need to particularly employ any fancy strategies, it's just fight. That said, they are by no means the weakest or the strongest. They tend to be regarded as being a slower faction and more defensive. They tend to fight head-on, and they also have the strongest late game. It is arguable. But with regards to that, yeah, I would honestly recommend that a beginner uses the UEF faction because all other factions are much easier to compare when you have a baseline from the UEF. I should probably mention at this point that I will not go through particular unit comparisons between the factions. That video has already been done by someone called Brink of Insanity, and I will put a link in this video down below if I can find it. He will go through differences between units, but this game in general, the differences between the units, they are roughly equivalent in that they will fulfill similar roles, but there may be particular caveats to them that mean that they perform differently. And I will exemplify this as an example, Cybran faction. The Cybran faction, for instance, is considered to be weaker than the UEF with regards to straight out fight. In a straight out fight one-on-one, Cybrans will lose. As you can see here, this Mantis is meant to be the equivalent of a tank. However, the tank has 30 more HP. You could therefore argue that the Mantis has 10% less hit points, and therefore, one-on-one, you can see who would lose. This is not including Micro. The difference, and exemplifying the Cybran faction, is that the Mantis is simply faster. The Cybran faction relies on much more focused on map control, on speed, on aggression, and simply controlling the opponent. Because if they can't, then they are not long for the world, because in a straight-out scrap, they don't fare that well at all. Their defenses are mediocre to appalling at best, and with regards to their mass efficiency, it's not that great. Equal mass of UEF units to Cybran units, UEF will win. Cybrans require a mixture of units for best effect, and as such, for the beginner, it is recommended perhaps not to use them. Cybran's shining points are that they have the most gimmicks of any faction that can outright kill people, and they also require other gimmicks such as stealth, such as EMP, in order to actually stand a fair fight. But because these are considered to be more advanced concepts, I would recommend that a novice not use them. But if they feel that the UEF is too slow, or they simply like the look of the Cybran units, because at the end of the day that's why I chose Cybran, just because they look the best, then by all means you can probably pick them. No one's going to particularly hate you for it, because at the end of the day a tank is a tank. At lower levels it's not going to make that big of a difference. It's just I'm trying to imagine this from the perspective of time and attention spent, and with regards to efficiency of your actions and units. The next faction that I shall talk about, I am going to throw my hands up and say I don't have a lot of experience with them. The Seraphim are considered a jack of all trades. As you can see, they have the second highest hit points in the ACU. At the same time, they don't have the regeneration of a Cybran, and they are considered to be good in all fields. They have an incredibly strong Tech 2, but they fall off late game. This is also perhaps why I don't recommend them for novices, because they perform differently. For instance, they have a higher reliance on artillery, they have a higher reliance on their Tech 2, and later on, and novice games have a tendency to drag on because people don't know how to kill each other, they fall off. And that is why, in a nutshell, I would avoid them. Lastly, we should probably talk about the Aeon race. They are very micro-intensive, and you need to micro them well in order to get the best effect out of them. They are considered to be the best air faction, purely because they have the most options available. Again, refer to Brink of Insanity's tutorial videos as to why that is. Their units can be mass efficient, but as said before, they require a lot of micro to be used. At the end of the day, if you really wish to go through it the hard way, you can start with Aeon, because some people argue that you should do things the hard way and learn everything without any mistakes from the beginning, but some people again are into such things such as pain, so whatever boats your float, really. That is really the end of that, and that is the faction differences. UEF, bulkier, more defensive, does what it does in the tin, what recommended for beginners because there are no real quirks to it. Cybran, faster, focus on map control and aggression, they require more quirks and more interesting strategies and combined arms in order to win the game. Seraphim, jack of all trades, very strong Tech 2, fall off late game. Aeon, no one really likes them, and if you play Aeon, people won't like you either. But I might be biased because I play Cybran.
Commander under attack.
Anyway, that will be the end of this video. My name is Servio Pride. This will end episode 4. And as always, good luck and have fun. Fucking